Isn't it great to have some good news to talk about for once? I'm almost afraid when I get up every morning to turn on the radio and pick up a newspaper with all the bad news that seems to be flying around out there. And I keep telling myself it's not all that bad. I'm not sticking my head in the sand. Yes, we have our challenges. Yes, we're going through tough times nationally and globally. But there is some good stuff happening, and that's the focus of this morning. And we now have this report by Joseph Quinlan, which tells me that I haven't been deluding myself. As Brian has said today, we're launching Built to Last, the Ireland-US economic relationship, a comprehensive report on foreign direct investment and the strong economic relationship that exists between both our countries. And Joseph momentarily will outline in details the findings of the report. But Joseph's findings confirmed the importance to the Irish economy of US investment, if any confirmation were needed. But the report goes further than that. It points out the two-way nature. This is a reciprocal relationship that exists that sometimes gets forgotten about. The trade and investment relationship between Ireland and the US, and the very real and significant contribution that Irish companies make to the US economy. But first, the good news. For the first half of this year, and I'm probably going to repeat some of the metrics that were shown on the clip there, but I think they're so impressive they deserve repeating, so I won't apologise for repeating them. For the first half of this year, foreign direct investment in Ireland by US companies totaled more than $17.7 billion. That's for the first part of this year alone. That represents an increase of almost 50% on the same period in 2010. This adds significantly to the total value of US assets in Ireland, which were shown earlier. As a result, it's now estimated that US investment in Ireland accounts for over 1/4 of our total GDP. And this US investment has also played a significant role in the dramatic growth in that GDP, which we witnessed in the 3 decades from 1980 to 2010. And during that GDP, or during that period, those 3 decades, Ireland's GDP increased tenfold, bringing us from one of the lowest per capita income levels in Europe to now one of the highest. But as I mentioned a few moments ago, this is a two-way street. It's not all take. There's also a give in this relationship. And Irish companies in the US are making their presence felt as well, with FDI from here reaching a record $8 billion last year, which we saw earlier, bringing the total value of US investment, total Irish investment in the US to more than $30 billion for the first time. And even more impressive is the jobs total. I think in the past we quoted 80,000, but Joseph has told us now that in terms of his research, there are 120,000 direct jobs, that's just direct jobs, supported by Irish companies in the United States, which is another record high. There's more good news on the home front. The Irish economy grew by 1.6% in the second quarter of the year, bringing GDP growth to 2.3% on an annual basis. So in the current global economic environment, I think that's superb performance. And that's been driven by exports, both on behalf of US multinationals operating here and indeed indigenous Irish firms here. So a lot of good news, which I'm delighted to share. And as I said, with all the bad news that's going around, it's good to remind ourselves of the good stuff that's happening. But with all this good news, we need to obviously be cautious, and I need to have a health warning. And that warning is that we should not allow ourselves get carried away by a few straws in the domestic wind while the storm is raging around us internationally. The US Federal Reserve recently has issued its most dire warning to date regarding the prospects of a double-dip recession in the United States. And on top of this, the problems of the Greek and Italian debt and their potential to destabilize the whole Eurozone economy haven't gone away. But to quote a famous US politician, these are the known unknowns. And they are also factors which we here in Ireland, we cannot really alter or influence. We don't really have any ability to meaningfully impact those factors. And what we need to focus on today here in Ireland is the things we can change. It actually reminds me of a guy I used to play Gaelic football with once. And when he'd miss a ball, or the guy he was marking would get to the ball before him, he would get really frustrated and upset with himself, and he'd be berating himself for 5 or 10 minutes, and he'd lose concentration. I just have to remind him, look, that ball is gone. Focus on the thing you can change. Focus on the next play. That's what you can change. And it's the same here with Ireland Inc. We need to focus laser-like on the things that are in our control, the things that we can change. And in our economic context, I guess these things are no surprise. They can be boiled down to the golden triangle of tax, talent, and competitiveness. And firstly, I want to congratulate successive governments on the trenchant and ultimately successful defence of our 12.5% rate of corporation tax here. That rate is just half the European average, and according to PwC and the World Bank, and stated again in this report, Ireland ranks only behind Luxembourg and Cyprus in Europe for having the most favourable tax rates for businesses. Yes, we've had President Sarkozy and quite a few other European politicians telling us how good Ireland have had it on corporation tax in the past. But interestingly, the effective rate in France and other European countries can actually be less than 12.5%. And what makes Ireland's tax rate so attractive is one word: transparency. There's a certainty about our tax rate which other countries simply can't offer at present. You don't have to do anything special to qualify for the 12.5% rate, and you can't be disqualified from it at the whim of a politician or a local official. But obviously we shouldn't allow ourselves to get complacent and think that the war has been run on the tax rate. The most recent battle may have been won, but for as long as Europe's economic problems persist, politicians will find it hard to resist having a go at Ireland for what they will term our unfavourable corporation tax rate, and we have to remain on guard at all times for further attacks because they will come. The second part of that golden triangle I refer to as talent. You know, we've been talking about the knowledge economy for many years now, and but we have to recognise that the knowledge economy is here for real. If you look at our foreign direct investment wins this year, which was up, 49% on last year, and the past few years, the majority of the investments have been in what we would term the knowledge sector. And even when they involve manufacturing, I'm a manufacturing guy myself, as Brian said, we employ over 2,000 people in Medtronic in Galway. The bulk of those jobs are in manufacturing. And we've moved a lot of jobs. I know Covidian had an announcement this morning, which we did an RT interview earlier where I was asked about that, where they're moving a manufacturing line. My answer to that is companies do this all the time. As head of Medtronic, I have moved hundreds of jobs from Galway to low-cost locations. But the good news is we've managed to replace those hundreds of jobs, labour-intensive assembly-type jobs, with high-end manufacturing technology-intensive jobs. So I don't really worry when I hear about companies moving manufacturing lines from here to there. That's part of doing business. But as I said, in terms of the knowledge economy is not just about R&D and services. The knowledge economy also applies to manufacturing, and manufacturing is we've got a very precious manufacturing base here. And sometimes when people talk about the knowledge economy, it's almost like manufacturing is old hat. That doesn't matter. The critical mass of jobs are in manufacturing, and we cannot afford to forget that. So obviously this is placing increasing demands on our talent pool as we move up the value chain and up the knowledge curve. And there are some encouraging signs recently that second-level students, thankfully, are moving more towards science and technology subjects. But I feel problems remain in terms of our third-level output and our declining performance with respect to mathematics at second level. And again, this was borne out in our Leaving Cert results just gone by. That is particularly worrying. And even as I speak, there are people engaged in working on the hard choices which have to be made in the next budget, which is coming up. And we all know and accept that painful decisions have had to be made to help our recovery in previous budgets, and that there's more pain to come. But some things are just too important to have to, and too critical to our future to have to share the same or shoulder the same brunt of the burden, and one of those things is education. And to the maximum extent possible, investment in education must be maintained. Cuts now will not only make a future generation pay a price for something for which they're not responsible, but will have far-reaching consequences for our ongoing ability to attract foreign direct investment. But don't get me wrong, I'm not standing here this morning and saying that we shouldn't go near education. We should definitely, just because I'm saying that we shouldn't have cuts in education, that doesn't mean that we should not critically review the fitness for purpose, the quality and the efficiency of our education system. Actually, when I think of the Ireland education system, it reminds me of a great leadership. Joseph may be aware of this one. It's a book by an author called Marshall Goldsmith called "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." It's about leadership success. And the title of that book reminds me of the Irish education system. What got us here in 2011 will not get us there. And we really need to, we absolutely need to quickly, we can't spend the next 5-10 years doing this. We need to quickly remodel, retool, re-engineer our education system to meet the needs of the future. I'm very, very passionate about that. We gotta quickly do this. And I'm glad to hear, we met with the Minister for Education recently and the Chamber to discuss this. So I'm glad to see that plans are afoot, but we cannot waste any time on this. So to put in context the importance of education, even if we had the lowest corporation tax in the world, it would not matter a whit if we didn't have the qualified, skilled workforces that modern companies need. It would not matter a whit. I guess going back to that golden triangle, the third point of that triangle is competitiveness. And I guess in terms of, I guess that's probably the single most important factor in the recent upturn in our fortune has been our improved competitiveness. Between 2000 and 2007, Ireland's slide down the international competitiveness leagues was precipitous in its rapidity, and our export-led economy found itself with trade deficit balance year after year. Trade balance deficits year after year. And while nobody would wish upon any nation the circumstances which halted the trend in competitiveness and started to turn it around, every cloud has a silver lining, and the fact remains that some good has come out of our recent and current difficulties in regards to our competitiveness. And as confirmed in this report, our resurgent export performance has been underpinned by declining prices at home. Costs have come down in key areas such as energy, office rents, construction, and indeed in some cases wages. Actually, according to the National Income and Expenditure accounts, non-agricultural pay declined by 3.3% in 2010 and is expected to decline a further 0.3% this year. And this has contributed to a very significant rise in productivity in recent years, which has in turn has led into a record-breaking export performance of late. But again, this is only a battle which is half won. We cannot be complacent. We're already seeing energy costs beginning to rise steeply, and there are upward cost pressures in other areas of the economy as well. So action must be taken to ensure that we do not get caught up in an inflationary spiral which undoes the achievements of the past 3 years. So we must ensure that, again, going back to the things we can control, the things we do have influence over, we must ensure that our flexible and voluntary labour relations model remains in place. We must look at options to improve our competitiveness in the energy arena, and we must drive out restrictive and anti-competitive practices wherever they exist. These are the internal factors and challenges which we have to address if we are to maintain the recovery which appears to be taking hold. However, there is a further external threat which we must deal with as well, and the report refers to this very eloquently as the rise of the rest. And Joseph, I'm sure, will talk more about this in a moment. These are the countries which possess many of the obvious advantages in terms of low costs and high educational standards which Ireland had 30 years ago. And when we look to the future of knowledge-based industries, there I go back to those knowledge-based industries again, that we hope to thrive in, these countries are going to be our major competitors. We know who they are. And our future prosperity will be critically dependent on our ability to compete with these emerging economies in the areas of alternative and renewable energy, green tech, life sciences, and other high-end technologies. Our 12.5% rate of corporation tax, our highly skilled, qualified, flexible workforce, and our ability to compete internationally on cost and productivity will again be the foundation stones of our success in this regard. So tax, talent, and competitiveness. They're the 3 points in the triangle. Finally, we must look after what we already have, and this will require us to repair our public and national finances. We're reminded again in today's report that the financial health of Ireland really does matter. National financial instability is ranked as the number one negative for Ireland in the minds of foreign investors. But I'm pleased to say that despite all the difficulties we faced over the past 3 years, the commercial linkages between Ireland and the US have actually gone stronger, not weaker, deeper, not shallower. As they say that it's in times of crisis or in times of need that you really know who your friends are. I think over the past few years, we've certainly found out who our friends are. Thank you very much.